Hi everyone, thanks for joining in with us today. I'm excited to have Amy Soda Clarke joining us. So Amy
Hello.
is a writer and communications specialist. Originally from a small town in Minnesota, she completed a BA in theatre in the Twin Cities, then earned an MFA in creative writing with publishing at Kingston University in London. She currently lives in Melbourne, and her debut novel was Girl 11 and has been translated into 12 languages and published in 15 territories around the world. So thanks so much, Amy, for joining us. It's great to have you.
Yes, thank you for having me on.
And just wanted to mention that I finished reading Girl 11 this morning and absolutely loved it. It was 5 stars for me, really
Oh,
gripping and yeah, really wanted me. I think I read it probably in 2 or 3 days. So really just wanted to keep reading it to find out what was going to happen.
thank you. That's great to hear.
Just wondered if you wanted to start off by telling us a bit about Girl 11.
Sure. So, Girl 11 is about a true crime podcast host named El Castillo. And she is a former social worker and specializes in investigating cold cases of crimes against children in Minnesota, which is in the Midwest of the United States, if people don't know it. And in her latest season, she's gotten really popular. Her podcast's gone viral and has a lot of listeners. And so she decides she's going to tackle her white whale, which is the countdown killer. He was a notorious serial killer in Minnesota whose victims were each a year younger than the last, and he was never caught. And most experts think that he has died, and that's why he stopped killing. But she is convinced that he's still alive and that she can bring him to justice for his crimes.
And I'm really interested to know what was the first idea you had for the book?
It was actually for the killer. I had this idea of what if there was a killer whose victims were each a year younger than the last. And
Mm,
then I wanted to figure out why someone would do that and who would be the perfect person to try to hunt them down,
mm,
basically.
mm. And when I read out your bio, it's pretty amazing to read that, like, this is your debut novel and how many countries it's been published in.
Yeah, it's wild still. Whenever whenever
Mm,
that's in right, I wrote that bio, so I know
mm,
it, but to hear someone say it out loud is still just blows my mind. Like it's the most wonderful thing to be tagged, particularly on Instagram. I'll get tagged in reviews from North Macedonia and
mm,
Hungary and countries I can only dream of having the time and money to visit one day. Um, but it's actually my third book that I wrote. It's just the first one that actually happened to get published. So,
mm,
and I
mm,
think I think there's a lot of us out there that have written, several quote unquote failed manuscripts. Although I think you learn something from every manuscript
mm,
before you finally find the one that makes you the deal.
mm. So, can you tell us a little bit about your publishing story?
Sure. So as I said in the bio, I did a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing in Kingston, and that was really just an excuse to go and live in London for a year. I liked writing, and I thought it would be helpful to get a master's degree for future employment. But I will say just up front that I think master's degrees are great, and I'm really happy that I did mine, but it certainly is not a requirement to be a writer or a serious author by any means.
Mm,
Um, However, I really enjoyed my experience, and it helped me develop a lot as an author and learn, the ins and outs of publishing and how to get an agent and a book deal and all of that. And I married my husband, who's Australian, and moved here to Melbourne in 2014 and started querying with the manuscript that I developed in my master's degree the next year. And that actually landed me my agent, who is a US agent. I knew I wanted to be published in the States first. My books are always written and set in the United States, or at least so far they have been, even though I've lived in a couple different countries. And so I wanted to break into that market. And for that, I really wanted a US agent. So I landed Sharon Pelletier through Twitter pitching contest, actually, which I think is not to be anymore. Rest in
Okay.
peace, Pit Mad.
Mm,
It helped hundreds of authors, I think, get agents over the years. Anyway, so you know, we worked on that manuscript together a while, and then we started submitting it to editors. And unfortunately, after a while, we had to put it on the shelf. It just wasn't to be. And so then I started working on another manuscript, finished that, went after a few rounds of edits with her, went out to editors. Again, it didn't sell. Very heartbreaking, especially the second time, because you kind of
mm,
then question, you know, do I have what it takes to do this? You know, maybe I just got really lucky with this agent and my work isn't actually that great. But I think I was also still part of what my MFA had done was kind of give me a distaste for genre, which I think is part of the issue with a lot of MFAs is that, you know, it makes you think that literary fiction is the only way to write properly. And so I was really towing that line of literary suspense. And I think editors were just struggling to find out where they would put it on the shelf. And so with Girl 11, I decided to really commit to this thriller genre. I had been reading a bunch of Harlan Coben, and I thought his books were the best. And, you know, I loved that I could just finish a book in a day, and it was so addicting. So I really decided to commit to that. And it works because once we had it finished and edited, we sent it out, and I had a book deal in 3 weeks, which was
wow. Yeah.
amazing.
Mm. And then how did it go to get to be in so many different countries? Was that all just through the one agent?
Yeah, so my agency has a foreign rights agent who's, I think she's the vice president of the agency as well, but
Mm,
she deals with the foreign rights for everyone. And it just so happened to work out timing wise that it was just before the Frankfurt Book Fair. And this was in 2019, so it was pre-pandemic. So when there was actually still a, you know, in-person book fair and all of that. And so they sold a bunch of rights in preempts leading up to the fair, and then I believe during and after the fair as well.
mm,
But I was really lucky. There were some book scouts that were really talking about the book and, you know, building up buzz for it and stuff like that. So there were people who were really interested in reading it.
mm. And we've got a few people watching, which is great. I know that you've got a competition for your book. Do you want to let people know how they can win a copy of your
Yeah.
book?
Yeah, so you can see, oh, wrong hand. You can see I've got a few different copies up here. So this one that I'm pointing at here with the yellow writing is the UK paperback, which is just coming out. And I've got a few extra copies in the house. So I would love to do a giveaway for that. So if you're interested in reading it, I would love for you to leave a comment of your favorite podcast or audiobook. And if you don't like podcasts or audiobooks, just say your favorite book. But hopefully, you have a favorite podcast or audiobook you'd like to recommend because my book is obviously about a podcast. So I'm big into that.
And we've got some questions as well from people watching. Just reminding people if you do have a question for Amy, please type it in comments and I can read it out. Kelly wants to know if you have a favourite podcast.
Oh, I just finished listening to the newest season of Paper Ghosts. That's a really interesting one. It's a true crime author who hosts it, and he does a really good job. He does investigations into cold cases or crimes where things just weren't quite resolved. And I'm now currently listening to Tenfold More Wicked by Kate Winkler Dawson. It's on the Exactly Right network, which is the Georgia Hardstark and Karen Kilgariff's network of podcasts. And Kate is just an exceptional true crime author, and she's a true crime historian. So her cases are like go way back. And so the case I'm listening to about now, I think, took place in the 1930s with a man who murdered his parents. His dad happened to be a very sophisticated Supreme Court judge in Texas, I think.
Mm,
And so it's just about that case and all the different ins and outs of it. It's very lots of reveals and
Mm,
interesting factoids. So
mm, mm. And have you always been a crime lover?
I wasn't. I think I had really bad anxiety for like my young adulthood. And part of that was from watching Monk, of all things, which,
Mm,
if you've ever watched Monk, it's not the most scary true crime TV series, but I think watching so many episodes in a row made me feel like there was a murderer around every corner. And so I had a really bad year of just being like chronically anxious and insomniac. And so I stayed away from crime and stories like that for a while, just until I kind of got my head on straight and got over that
mm,
little bit of paranoia. And now I really love it. And I think part of that is because I look at it so differently than I used to. It's so much more gray than just, the police versus criminals and that kind of thing that I sort of the way I saw it growing up.
mm,
And so I'm really interested in all the different facets and, why people do what they do and how we might be able to, as a society, we might be able to intervene before that person commits that crime instead of just focusing on punishment after the fact.
mm, mm. And Belinda says she loves looking at your different covers behind you.
Thank you.
She wonders if you have a favorite.
Oh, it's so hard to pick, but I really do love the American cover, which is the one in the center
Mm,
with the plant on it, because it's exactly what I pictured when I pictured the cover for this book. And so I think that that's the reason I love it so much. And I think it's just so different from other crime and thriller book covers.
mm,
And what I really hoped was to have something that kind of stood out and grabbed you when you saw it on the shelf.
mm. And do you have a copy of every book from each, like of the cover from each country, or?
I'm supposed to get them. It
Mm,
sometimes takes a while, and international shipping right now is kind of a joke. So I think that's part of the reason that I don't have very many. I think I just have the Finnish one and maybe one other, but I'm just completely blanking on what
mm.
it is. And I have the audiobook for the German one, which is a bit
Okay,
funny.
yeah. And what about the title? Is that still like translates exactly the same, or have some countries changed the title?
Yeah, some countries have changed it. There's a lot of Girl 11 or Victim 11 in the translation.
Mm.
Um, the Italian version, I think, is called "I Am the Killer,"
Oh,
which
okay, so
is
quite different. Mm.
interesting. Yeah, that's the only one that comes to mind immediately. That's quite different.
Mm. And Kelly says like Girl 11 is a very catchy title. She
Oh,
wonders if
thanks.
you chose it.
I didn't actually. When we submitted it, it was sold under the title "Like Clockwork." And I'm a big fan of titles that have like that you see the title in the book somewhere, you know what I mean? And then you kind of do that. That's the title of the book when you read the line. Um, and yeah, so like clockwork was from a line in the book. Obviously, it's a common phrase. Um,
Mm.
but Girl 11 was in there as well, and my editor actually had the idea for it.
Yeah, it's quite a different, I'd say, sort of title, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I know obviously girl titles are common, especially
Mm.
in thrillers, but I
Mm.
felt with this one like the girl is actually a girl, whereas a lot of the girl titles are about fully grown women. Like the girl on the train, for example, like no shade, but she's an adult woman on the train. But anyway, that's
Yeah.
my
Mm.
little pet peeve.
And one question that I always like to ask authors is what you're working on next. But I know you've had a lot of changes in your life recently, so I don't know if you've got much
I
time for
have.
much else.
For people who don't know, I have nearly 7-month-old twins. And so they were born in September last year. And that's been a massive change, obviously.
Mm.
I had written my second novel during the first year of the pandemic, and that was hard enough. But writing it, rewriting it with my editors, um, rather significant changes, which I agreed with and knew needed to be made. Rewriting it during a pandemic while pregnant with and then raising twins has been
Mm,
pretty hectic.
mm.
But I'm actually making really good progress now. I think I'm going to be finished in a few weeks
Okay, yeah.
and be able to turn it in. So I'm really looking
Mm,
forward to that. So that's it's not a sequel to Girl 11, but it is set in Minnesota this time in a rather small town. And it's about a woman who returns to her small town after her ex boyfriend is killed. And she thinks that there's more to his death than the accident that's being claimed and covered up by her old church, which has super culty vibes.
oh, sounds interesting. So how do you find time to write in your day? Do you make sure do you have to schedule some time in or just fit it in when you can or
Like I said, it's been pretty hit or miss the last few months, but
mm,
when I am getting it done, usually is during the nap time for the boys. And thankfully, they're becoming a little bit more reliable with their naps. So I know if I
mm,
put them down, they will stay asleep. And even if they only stay asleep for 45 minutes, that's usually enough time
mm, mm,
to at least get, something hammered out. So
mm.
it's more just about forcing myself to do it when I'm exhausted all the time.
Yeah, that you wouldn't rather just have a nap while they
Yeah, well, and I'm watching The Wire too for the first time, and it's actually very addicting,
mm,
which is not a pun. It's about drugs, but I consider it research because it's about crime,
mm,
So,
mm. And could you tell us a bit about the sort of research you did for Girl 11?
sure. So, I actually listened to a lot of podcasts as research for that, not just because I wanted to get the vibe of the podcast transcript, but there's a lot of really incredible information available for free um, in podcast format,
Mm,
FBI behavioral analysts interviewing each other and talking about or analyzing major crime stories and talking about how they would, you know, analyze the behavior of the criminals in the case and et cetera, or, police officers, retired police officers or state's attorneys talking about cases that they've worked and stuff like that. Um, there's a really great memoir by Judy Melinek and TJ Mitchell called Working Stiff. And it's about her life as a forensic pathologist. So I got a lot of information there that actually inspired the character of Martine to be a forensic pathologist as well. And a lot of information about analyzing, how they determine the cause of death, et cetera,
mm,
was from that book. And I was able to interview a forensic toxicologist and um, a forensic DNA analyst about,
mm,
how they could determine certain things. Like, I'm lucky I work for a university, so I was able to just email one of the professors and be like, could you tell what kind of tea a stain was from? Like, would that even be possible?
mm, mm.
So things like that. And she sent me an article about how they had determined a specific ice cream from a stain once
Oh,
and that sort
okay.
of thing to
Yeah.
say that it was, more or less realistic. So
Mm.
there's always creative license allowed, I think, in thrillers, but you want to be as realistic as possible.
Yeah, yeah. You must have found some interesting things.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
Oh, and I did so much research on ricin poisoning. Like
Yeah.
a concerning amount of research on ricin poisoning. I'm probably flagged on some FBI computer somewhere.
Mm. And Kelly says you've been compared to Riley Sager and Karen Slaughter. She wonders what you think about those comparisons.
Look, they're two of the best crime writers, and just humbly, I will say that's my editor comparing. It's not it's
Mm,
not some random book reviewer, but we were trying to find with any author comparison like that, you're trying to find people who have a significant readership that you truly believe would enjoy your story as
mm,
well,
mm,
especially when it's a debut author. no one's ever heard of me. Hundreds of books are released every Tuesday. Why should someone pick up my book
Mm,
besides hopefully enjoy, liking the idea of the premise? Um, well, if you like this person's book and this person's book, we think that you actually would like it. And it's no good comparing you to someone that you have nothing in common with,
yeah.
because then readers feel cheated
Mm,
if they read, you know, if
mm,
they read the book and you're nothing like them. So,
mm. So are they a couple of authors that aspire you?
yeah, look, I have a lot of different authors who, I really enjoy reading.
Mm,
But I can't say that there's any one author that I, really take as a role model, or, want to, I want their career, or I want to write like them.
mm,
Um, there's certainly different authors that I think I have like almost every book written by Leon Moriarty. And, she has a very different style to
mm,
what I do.
mm,
But she writes sort of that suspenseful kind of area. So it's not a huge far cry. Um, so she's one that I've probably read the most. Candace Fox as well. I think you can see just above me. I have almost every one of her books as well.
mm.
She's an Australian crime author, but she's pretty popular overseas now as well. Um, and yeah, I certainly have enjoyed what I've read of Riley Sager and Karen Slaughter for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And Kelly says she's wondering if you've had much time for reading with your twins. Um,
No, that's one of the things. I think this is the longest I've gone in my adult life without reading a
without,
book, and it's
yeah.
really hard. But it's sort of one of those. If I have the brain space to focus on a book, I need to be focusing on mine, because I've already
Mm,
extended my deadline like 3 times.
mm,
So I actually have a manuscript that was sent to me by my publisher to potentially blurb, and I'm dying to read it, but I'm just kind of waiting to try to finish writing my manuscript so that I can really dive into someone else's work. But
yeah.
I've got stacks behind me, and most of them have not been read, because I tend
Mm,
to give away the books that I have read unless I really want to keep them.
mm, mm. And what about writing something set in Australia? Is that something that you'll think you'll do sometime?
I don't know. I kind of feel like I would be sort of stealing someone else's culture in a way.
Mm,
Like, I'm a dual citizen. I've lived here for almost 8 years. I love Australia. It's my home. But I still just don't feel quite right um, writing about it. I feel like
yeah.
there's just so much that I don't know, having not grown up here, um, and all of that. Minnesota for me, even though I don't intend to ever live there again, is like what I know. Like, I
Mm,
know,
mm,
the people, and I know the differences between living in a small town and a big city. And, I know the road names and all of that stuff. I feel like
yeah.
it's easy for me to slip in you know, little breadcrumbs and things. Like, I really loved that about writing Girl 11, because it's tragic, because obviously it was always around murders, but I was
Mm,
able to sort of talk about little places that I loved in the Twin Cities, unfortunately, as sites of bodies being found.
mm, mm.
But I just don't feel like I could do that here yet.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
one day.
Yeah. And MJ said she knows you said you used your contacts to gain some info, but in general, how receptive are people in talking to you about topics you want to write about?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've just been really lucky. I think I did reach out maybe once or twice to Minneapolis Police Department, and I never got a response, but that ended up being okay, because I originally Elle was going to be a detective, and so I
Mm,
wanted it to be really realistic and all that. And I'm so glad that I ended up making her just an average person, and, someone who had familiarity with the police but who is not a cop herself.
mm,
It opened the door so much for me creatively to be able to do what I wanted,
mm,
and not have to worry about procedure, or being yet another book where the detective breaks all the rules.
mm,
Um, but yeah, generally people have been really kind in responding to my emails, experts in particular, and the people who couldn't couldn't help or really apologetic, and obviously had good reason,
Mm,
being busy or whatever the case would be.
mm. And you said your next book isn't a follow on from Girl 11, but do you see Our Lever coming back in a future book?
I I go back and forth on that, to be honest. Like, I think that there's definitely room for her to grow more,
Mm,
and there's
I could definitely
more
see.
that could be
Yeah.
done.
Mm,
Um, but a part of me kind of hopes maybe it'll get, optioned for a TV series or something like
yeah.
that. So it
Mm,
could be developed that way, and she can
mm,
have, future seasons that she does.
mm, mm. And Kelly wonders if you've always wanted to be an author.
Yeah, I think um, when I was maybe 13 or 14, we had an author visit our town who was from Minnesota and wrote books set in like Minnesota, Wisconsin, so that area. And that was the first time that I realized, like, oh, someone can really do this. Like, this could be a
Mm,
real job.
mm,
And so I really loved writing already, and I kind of wanted to be an author from that. And then I sort of decided I loved theater instead. And so I got really into acting and took a break from writing for a few years. And so that was my undergraduate. And I graduated when I was 19 from college because the way it works in Minnesota, you can take college classes your last 2 years of high school if you want. So I graduated early. And then I had a few years to work and was just working waitressing and retail jobs, and, got back into writing again. And yeah, that's
mm,
kind of where it led me.
mm. And what sort of books did you like reading when you were growing up?
Anything with like girls solving mysteries,
Mm,
yeah, was
mm,
a big thing for me. I don't know if um if I would care for it now, but there was these series of books called the Mandy books, I think. I was never really into
mm,
Nancy Drew, or like the Hardy Boys or anything like that, which were obviously really big for people my age. But yeah, I loved that, and I loved especially when it was like historical as well.
mm,
So there were books about this girl, I think her name was Sadie, who lived on the prairie, and she solved mysteries. And then there was another one about a girl who lived on a steamboat in, during the 1800s, like prior to the Civil War, and helped, enslaved people escape
mm,
and that kind of stuff. Like,
mm.
I was really interested in all of that because I think it was a way of learning about history without having to read a history book.
Yeah, yeah. And when you're writing, are you a person who likes to share as you write, or do you just wait to the end when you give it to your editor?
I always want to share, and then I'm mad or, dejected when it's
Mm.
when the feedback isn't good. So I have my one critique partner, who's an author herself,
Okay.
Bethany C. Morrow,
Mm,
and her books are exceptional. Um, so definitely read Cherish Farah if you're into thrillers and suspense. It's a social horror thriller that just came out. It's so good. But anyway, so I share things with her, and I feel like she knows me better than
mm,
anyone else and knows like what I'm trying to say with my work and stuff. So it's not just necessarily about like the craft of the writing, but it's, I don't think you're quite nailing what you're trying to say here, that kind of stuff,
mm,
which I really love. And then when she's a person also who doesn't just give compliments, easily. So when she likes it, I know it's really good. And
yeah.
so then I feel much more confident sharing it with my agent and my editor.
Mm, mm. And what about reading reviews? Are you someone who reads your reviews?
I read all of them that like in the lead up to publication, pretty
Mm,
much every one.
mm.
But then once the book came out, like first of all, it was kind of, is that me making that noise or
No,
sorry?
I can't hear a
Okay.
noise. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, got
Um,
it.
yeah, once it came out, it just kind of became overwhelming, and um, it wasn't good for me, and I know it's not good for a lot of authors. It was a distraction. So
Mm,
Sometimes I will go and, filter for 5-star reviews just to get a little boost. But most of the time I just stay away, especially from Goodreads.
Yeah. And have you got any tips you'd like to give new writers?
I think my biggest tip for writers is always just to take the advice that works for you and leave everything else behind. I think there's a lot of really prescriptive writing advice, like you have to write every day or you have to write in a notebook and, you whatever, I'm sure that every person who likes to write has heard the same 5 bits of advice over and over again. And
Mm-mm.
for me, it's always just been like, just do what works for you. Like,
Mm,
I think Neil Gaiman just tweeted recently that he wrote Coraline like one line a night for a while.
mm,
Like it, most people would say that if you're spending that little time on writing, then it's probably not worth it. But everybody's different, and what works for you might not work for anyone else, and that's okay.
mm. Well, thanks for that.
Sweet.
Just wondering before we go, do you want to let people know how they can keep in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I'm on Twitter and Instagram mostly, although I am on Facebook. I'm my face author Facebook page is actually a member of Global Girls Online. But you can find me if you just search my name because it's with the suitor. It's pretty unique, but it's just a suitor Clarke on all platforms. And I'll just say again, in case anyone's joined, since we started, I'm giving away a copy of the UK paperback of Girl 11. If you leave in the comments your favorite podcast or audiobook, I will enter you into the draw and do a random selection sometime tomorrow.
Thanks for that, and thanks so much for joining us. It's been great chatting to you, and just want to say again to everybody watching that I loved Girl 11. So if you haven't read it yet, please go out and buy it or get it from the library. And it was a 5-star read for me, so really great.
Thank you
Um,
so much. Thank you for this community. It's so great. It's so supportive. I really appreciate all the work you put into this.
yeah, thank you, and thanks to everyone who joined in and asked questions.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.